Another week, another episode of House of the Dragon, my favorite show on television, and I hope it is yours as well. I'm, of course, Jimmy Nuts, and this is going to be my thoughts and reactions to everything in episode 8 of season 1 of House of the Dragon. We've been doing these weekly, and they have been a great time, and I am rocking a little bit of a different setup here. I'm actually finally using my DSLR camera, so let me know how it looks, how it sounds, all that good stuff. Might be changing the angle up here in a bit. Not tonight, obviously, but in another video. So good to see everyone, and I'm excited to see what other people thought. This is a episode that was pretty monumental. It was my favorite episode so far. I feel like I say that a lot, but I really did believe that episode 4 to this point had been my favorite, and this one takes the cake. This one actually takes that place for me. So I am very excited where the show is going. I think that we have finally got past the time jumps, or at least the ones that will be significant, and we're settling in with the cast. And this episode was a little bit of a slower episode, even though some really big and impactful moments. Some of my favorite, not just in this series, and not just in Westeros TV, but in all of television. Which we will get into, of course. It's great to see everyone here jumping into the chat. Derry and Kev's tuning in from the dark. The poor guy's been out of power all day. Meredith, I'm glad that you can catch a live show. That is awesome. Good to see you. Astrid says, Jimmy, I cried like a baby watching this episode. It was absolutely incredible. All the feels. Yeah, I think that this one was a pretty hard hitting one, at least, if you're enjoying the cast and enjoying the show. I pumped my fist. I screamed at my TV at one point, and I even got a little bit choked up, like legitimately. Which, when I read or watch media, that can happen. I wouldn't say it happens all the time, especially now that I consume so much so that I can, make content and talk about it. I said consume and not watch or read. Someone's going to bust me on that. But yeah, it's not as often as it used to be that I get choked up watching a show, especially. So kudos to the cast, and we got to give Paddy Considine a round of applause. King Viserys, in my opinion, the best king we've ever seen in Westeros TV, possibly the best one season appearance by a character. I mean, we do have a lot of heavy hitters in that category, one of them being Eddard Stark. But Ned was phenomenal and kind of tragic in his own right, obviously, and so was Viserys. So I don't know. Would you pick a single season? And we're talking about strictly in the show. Chat, would you pick Eddard or would you pick Viserys as like the standout performance if you had to pick one? I know there's other like one season characters, but those two seem to be the most significant. I am so dehydrated. Had to take a drink. Favorite scene in the show so far, Tony, is without a doubt Viserys' walk this episode, no doubt. Yeah, so Sally, I actually agree with you. Said I loved it so much. I didn't know I loved the King that much. So I'm invested in the show because it's Westeros and it's George R.R. Martin and it's HBO. Like it's all the things I love. But I wasn't actually aware of how much I had become attached to the characters in the show, which I think is even more impressive than something like Game of Thrones because of the time jumps and how big of a hurdle those have been. But damn, did Paddy not knock it out of the park? Absolutely killed it. Played a different version of Viserys 8 episodes in a row and was pretty much always a centerpiece of the episodes. Like even the ones where it was like a little bit more Daemon or a little bit more Rhaenyra, he was still always at the core of their character development and the conflict. So Paddy embraced this role and ran with it. I think he does deserve an Emmy, but I don't watch enough TV to really say that. So I'm going to add my voice to the crowd, but I'm not the person who should be saying who wins an Emmy because I never watch television. Ever. Whitney says that she would give it to Viserys hands down for best single season character, and Derry agrees. I wonder if recency bias is playing into this just a little bit. I'm not questioning you because I think I might actually pick Viserys as well, but I've been battling back and forth with this in my head. It's not an easy one because when you go back and you look at Ned's conversations with Robert Baratheon, they're hard hitting. Like, they're a lot more hard-hitting than I remembered. Viserys, because I hated his guts and still cried for him. Yeah, both have their faults, right? Bedard and Viserys both for sure messed up at points, and in a way were too nice for the game that they were playing. Whitney says, I love the insight Paddy gave on his IG post. The way he played his character was completely based on his regret of what happened to Emma. It was beautifully done. Yeah, and you never felt like Emma was forgotten. Like, it was obviously she gets fridged in episode 1, and it's pretty brutal. And a lot of people, that kind of turned him off. But I have to say that Paddy, as an actor, was like, I'm going to keep that in my head, and that's going to be a driving point for this character going forward. And he did such a nice job. And the writing team, calling Alice and Emma. Brutal for you, Allison. Sorry. But good for us as a viewer that we still feel that connection. And then his last words, being no more, my love. Maybe he's seeing Emma on the other side. Maybe. Gives me chills just thinking about it. What an excellent, excellent performance. Paddy should be casted King Shrewd if they ever adapt Farseer trilogy. I think he'll be synonymous forever now with King Viserys. So they might have to. Does Paddy have any kids? Does Paddy have any kids that could play King Shrewd? Yeah, for sure. Let's go, Matt. Me and Matt just recorded a Patreon episode over on the Bend the Knee Patreon last night. That is a really good episode. We went over an hour and we are just digging through some stuff. Bend the Knee is really ramping up. And if you're not aware, I've said it about 100 times now, but for those who are first timers, I do co-host a Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon type podcast with my good friend Matt Super Gainsbros. It's a podcast that's been around a long time, and if you want to see me talk even more in depth about Westeros, A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, head over to the Bend the Knee YouTube channel, and you can download it as a podcast anywhere you get your podcast. A lot of good stuff. Sally says, I would love to have Viserys as a father. He loved Rhaenyra so much. Well, as long as you're Rhaenyra, because he doesn't seem to care too much about Aegon or Aemon or any of the other kids. We have to be fair. He's playing favorites, right? But I think every parent has their favorite kid. I know everyone's going to say, no, we treat them equally, but I've never believed that as long as I've lived. The hard part is trying to figure out who my parents' favorite kid is. I'm not sure. He walked not to the throne, but to his daughter. Damn. Yeah, how about that entire throne scene, man? Just absolutely incredible. Do you even have mods, Jimmy? No, okay. She said, oh my God, mods. Can you please link it? No. I do not have mods, but that might be coming in the future for how big the Chatting with Nuts episodes are getting. Would you care about Aegon or Aemon, though? Little shit stains. Hey, come on. Aemon, whether or not he's on the right side of things, Aemon's a badass kid, or was. And now he's a death dealer. I mean, you can just tell this dude is for real. I thought it was really interesting that a lot of the critics were saying that this was Aemon's episode. And I understand why they feel that way. I understand why they said it, because this dude demands to be revered and to be acknowledged on screen. But this was Viserys' episode. Like, when you really sit down and think about it, yeah, Aemon's there. It's cool. Daemon has his moment. Vaemond has his moment, just for a short second. But I think that this is without a doubt Viserys' episode. Now, it does give us Aemon to attach onto since Viserys is now passed, which is really cool. I thought Aemon's performance is outstanding, but we do have to acknowledge the fact that he looks way older than his older brother. Come on. When we look at Viserys next to him, down here in this corner of the screen, you can kind of see it. Aemon does look a little bit older, doesn't he? I'm not crapping on it or anything. I don't think you could cast anyone. I'm sure when they did the casting for this and they were doing auditions, I'm sure there were a lot of people that came in that probably looked a little younger than Aegon, but none of them had the presence that this dude has. This actor is Aemon all the way. So even though I think he does look a little bit older than his older brother, I don't necessarily care. I think I can give it a pass. And I think probably a lot of you will as well, just because he's killing it. He's killing it. He went a few lines, but man, too good. Too good. Super Gains Bros. Matt says, is there a connection to when Gurm releases books and the overall success of the New York Jets and Giants? It's possible. Jimmy and I broke it down on Patreon. Yes, on the Ben and E Patreon, we do go through a correlation of when the Jets and the Giants have winning seasons. It turns out that books maybe possibly get released sooner when that happens. And I'm just saying the Giants are looking good this year. The Giants are looking hella good if you're watching football. Yeah, the entire scene from the moment Viserys enters the throne room, he just owned every second. I would love to know how long that scene ran, and the music was intense, so good. Yeah, Whitney says, did anybody else see Grimm's Not a Blog Post? Sounds like a success of the show has given him some momentum in writing wins. Yeah, he said Ryan Condell's focused on season 2 of House of the Dragon, and I am focused on the Winds of Winter. Even him just mentioning it is a good feeling. George has taken a lot of W's this year. It's been a good year for George, just as a person. You know, he went through a lot of stuff during COVID, as we all did, but he's watched a lot of friends pass, and it's pretty brutal. The thing that about the Not a Blog Post that I loved so very much, and if you don't read the blog post, I'm not going to talk about it all in depth. We're going to have a video about it on Bend the Knee, but he mentions the fact that he loves that House of the Dragon's doing well. And he looks at Rings of Power not as competition, but as something that feeds the need for fantasy on television. And he mentions by name, he mentions Joe Abercrombie, Patrick Rothfuss, Robin Hobb, Ursula Le Guin, Tad Williams, Roger Zelazny. And it's like, I know that there's a lot of people who have ill will towards George in the publishing industry, especially other fantasy authors. I've seen it firsthand, even at times. And it seems like, you know, I don't know anything behind the scenes and whatnot, but at least the guy gives back. Like he's saying, hey, there's other worlds and stories that are going to be told because of this. And I genuinely believe that he wants those things because he has pieces of those authors, at least the older ones, in his work. It's all over. You know, a lot of people point at Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and say, oh my goodness, that is like the inspiration for A Song of Ice and Fire. But they're actually short selling Roger Zelazny's Chronicles of Amber. They're also selling short the fact that Jack Vance had a massive impact on George's writer. So when I see him mention those things in those blog posts, it like really tickles me to death, you know, being a reader and seeing him tip his hat to the other greats that are in the genre and to pave the way for him and the ones who have been coming after him as well, such as Joe Abercrombie, right? So pretty cool. Sorry to go on a tangent there, but I just absolutely love that blog post. I thought it was great. And also like giving Robin Hobb the rub. I mean, that's the best, right? And I shouldn't have said rub. Wrestling lingo. Don't worry about it. Aemon is a knockoff version of Daemon. I'm not going to disagree. The Greens got their own Daemon figure, right? Yeah, the best characters are the ones who don't have to say anything, right? I kind of like this. Peishi says, I thought it was on purpose to show that Aemon has worked his arse off and Aegon is a lazy douche. I see that. Like Aegon looks a little softer in the face, a little rounder in the cheeks, obviously taking liberties where he can. That was pretty rough with the handmaid. By the way, the serving girl, when she's telling Alicent what Aegon has done, the queen's handsmaid is behind her, and that is the handsmaid that runs and tells Massaria, who returns this episode, about the dinner that goes down, dinner time. That's big. That's really, 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 really big. That queen's handsmaid is feeding information to Massaria in the whorehouse. That is going to matter. Let's keep an eye on that, shall we? Am I the only one that prefers the old Aegon than the new one? Yeah. I mean, I think the Tenant Boy did a fantastic job, but it's not like the new one's bad. I mean, he came across like a complete douche, which I think is what they're trying to do. I saw some people get really angry that they're kind of just destroying poor Aegon and just making him very, very hateable. But, you know, that was bound to happen. I think some characters are going to be put a little lower and others are higher. I saw some people complaining maybe about a Rhaenyra whitewashing this episode, which I think is interesting. I would say let's hold off on that. There's plenty of time for Rhaenyra to do dastardly, terrible things that will make us question our allegiances to whether it's the Greens or the Blacks. Personally, for me, I don't care too much about the teams. I think it's kind of interesting to watch people like pick a team. And I think that's actually a really big part of success. Like, what house did you pick in Harry Potter? Or are you Team Jacob or whatever the Twilight teams were. So like picking a team is something that does fuel the pop culture fire. So that is cool to see people picking sides. I'm not necessarily as interested in that, just from like a viewer perspective. But Rhaenyra has plenty of time in the show to do things that make us question whether or not we want to support her and what kind of person that she is. So I think that we need to just slow down and look at the whole picture. And I also think I have some proof that kind of puts Vaemond's death on Rhaenyra's doorstep even more so than I think it already is, but like an implicit action that does kind of lead to the fact that Daemon didn't just act out by himself. You know what? We're already down the rabbit hole. Let's do it. I'll catch up on chat real quick, and then I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. I like to take breaks in between my points to try to get the chat. So like it all kind of, if you're watching after the fact, it kind of flows a little better instead of jumping back and forth. So looks like all the where's a Darren online post should be replaced with where's Maelor post. Yeah. If anyone doesn't know, the blog post did also say that Darren will be in season 2. He's at Old Town right now. For everyone who thought that he was getting cut. He is not. So it's all gravy, guys. Okay. Yes, Dookie Shoe. George is a huge fan of fantasy. And he's a nice guy. Can we not just accept that he has Chad genetics? Hey, some guys just have a strong jawline. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely. Okay, I think we're almost caught up here. Bob says, am I right in having heard George say that the dagger is more of a tie-in with his books and not Game of Thrones, as everyone keeps saying Arya ended up being the prince who was promised? No. He has not said anything about the dagger being book canon. No. He said that there's show canon and there's a book canon. He did a very long form interview and he sat down and he was very explicit. There's show canon and book canon. And also the Aegon secret, yes, that is from George, but them using it in the show with Viserys is actually Ryan Condell. He said he took it and he ran with it. And George was like, yeah, go for it. Who cares? Like, you can do whatever you want. So the fact that it passed down to this point, like the passing down of it is not officially book canon yet. Ryan Condell said it out of his mouth that he and the showrunners were the ones, him and probably Miguel, were the ones who decided to have it as something that Aegon passed down. So we have absolutely no confirmation that it's passed down. I think it's very likely that Aegon's secret was at least written down at some point during his reign, and that is what Rhaegar ends up finding because, yeah, duh. Like people who say there's no way Aegon, had this secret and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, did you really think Rhaegar just read some stuff and came out and was just like, I'm just going to be a warrior now. I require a sword. Like, come on. He obviously found something. And I think that will probably be from the conquest, if I had to guess. But no, just to be clear, the dagger at this point in the books is like with Peter Baelish in the Vale and doesn't seem to matter all that much. Now, could it? Sure. But the dagger is definitely show canon at this point. Okay, so we were talking about Rhaenyra, right? And the fact that some people are a little perturbed that it seems like Alicent and the Greens are the ones who are way, way, way in the wrong. I think when it comes to the children, I think that you could definitely feel that way because Rhaenyra's kids are kind of like, they're kind of silly, like it's almost, I almost feel bad for them. They're kind of dweebs in a way. Now, Jay's starting to stand up, speaking some by Valyrian. It's pretty cool. But when it comes to the kids, I think that Aegon is so hateable that it kind of washes over the rest of the green kids. So Aemon is not hateable yet. Maybe episode 8, I guess he could be, right? I think there's at least a case back and forth for him. But Helaena is wonderful. Helaena is so nice. She's probably the one character you can say that is good so far in the show. But when we look at what Rhaenyra has done, a lot of people wanted it like in the books where Vaemond dies because of Rhaenyra, right? Rhaenyra is responsible for his death in the books. In the show, we saw that Daemon said he can keep his tongue. He took his head, chopped his head off. Also, how sharp was that Valyrian blade, huh? Valyrian steel don't play around. It'll chop straight through and leave your tongue in your head. Pretty wild stuff. Very Hollywood-esque, but I dug it. I loved it. It was an oh shit moment. I yelled. So there you go. But did you notice that Daemon looked to Rhaenyra for confirmation that he should do it before it happened. I didn't. I found a random Twitter thread that has blown up and now has 2.2 million views. And if you go back and you watch the episode, you will see that before Daemon cuts Vaemond's head off, this happens. And I hope you guys can see this, but watch Rhaenyra's face, okay?
And their name. And their name.
Daemon looks for approval. Rhaenyra looks, silent nod of approval. He's got to go. Guys, that is the subtle stuff in this show that I am here for. And yes, a lot of the stuff on Alicent's side has been a lot more in your face. But what this is reading, it's the breadcrumbs of getting somewhere where, you know, Rhaenyra is not innocent here at all. Also, think about the trauma that she inflicted on Rhaenys. Poor Rhaenys. Also loved all the Rhaenys stuff in this episode. Love her coming to play ball at court, stand up for herself, sitting on the Driftmark throne was sick. She is probably one of my, if not my favorite Targaryen. Definitely my favorite female Targaryen, for sure. And I thought that the scenes at Driftmark, I love that they're not just going there once, like they're actually, you know, having scenes there. But that little subtle nod from Rhaenyra shows that she is in charge. She is signing off on some of this stuff, and she is willing to go deep. Very, very deep. So not someone said hashtag nodgate. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So I think that what we could take from that is that, yes, maybe Rhaenyra looks like the good person at this point, but it's going to come in waves, because if you have them both be bad at the same time, you're going to lose viewers. You have to have someone up every episode on the moral scale. And I think that this episode towed the line with really having Alicent be good. Like, I thought Alicent was very sympathetic this episode. I thought she was very genuine. Whenever Rhaenyra says, you know, I will come back on Dragonback after I see my kids over to Dragonstone, and Alicent says, I would like that, and so would the king. I believe her. I 100% believe her. Now, do I think Otto Hightower wants that to happen? Not at all. That dude's playing the game. He is here to win. And also, we can talk about Viserys walking to the throne for his daughter, showing up in the emotional moment in the bedroom prior to it. Just breathtaking stuff. I love the acting. I thought the writing was so solid. When Viserys walked to the throne, I will sit the throne today. Let's go. One of my favorite moments in television. I absolutely was sold. I was yelling at my TV. I'm not audible usually when I watch television shows. I'm pretty silent most of the time. I was hyped. And Otto is sitting in that chair. I'm like, Otto, get your ass out of that chair, because the king is here, baby. I loved it. There's something about the trope of an old withered king or warrior making his last stand. And this was Viserys' last stand, not just as a king, but as a father, as a Targaryen. And when he looks to his side, and he's already shrugged off help, and the camera pans over, and we see Daemon, I'm getting chills. My hair's standing up. My little bit of hair I have on my arms is standing up. I have chill bumps everywhere. And then the crown falls off his head, which supposedly was not meant to happen. It was a mistake. The crown fell. They kept rolling, and Matt Smith just went with it and picked up the crown and put it on his head and crowned him as he sat. So if that indeed was a mistake and that was improv, that is a moment that you could never recreate, and how organic that it was. And it felt that way on camera. And this is the sympathetic moment for Daemon that I was talking about whenever I talked about the exclusion of Daemon not hugging his daughters after his wife passed. I said, well, they may be wanting to save that big sympathetic moment where we really feel for Daemon later on. Some of you are going to say, well, you can do both. I agree. But at this point, Daemon's on a streak of doing some pretty heinous stuff. And this is the first time, especially since we saw him spurn Viserys last episode at the funeral, see him in a more sympathetic light. See him be caring. See his true emotions. Let's just say what it is. He loves his brother. And I think that this moment paid off in that way. It made me get teary-eyed, because we didn't get the hug earlier. Now, I have no way of saying that's true. Maybe it would have hit me just as hard, but I get the feeling that they didn't go to the well too many times to make sure that we remember that Daemon is a real person with feelings and that he's not Maegor the Cruel. I just think that this moment was built up to, especially after last week, how I talked about how heartbreaking it was to see the two brothers not talk at the funeral, or when they did talk, it was pretty tense. This was the best moment in the show for me. The whole time that he is on the chair or the throne, just tremendous. Like whatever it was, 15 minutes. It's 15 minutes of 10 out of 10 television for me. And one of my favorite moments in all of Westerosi TV and all of television. And that's my big rant for that. That's really what I wanted to come on here and talk about. That's why I wanted to go live. I just wanted to talk about that scene. I really did. Absolutely incredible. Incredible. Also, just like the subtle acting, Aegon being completely, he doesn't care. He's like yawning and stuff. Like he has no interest in who's going to be the Lord of the Tides. And then, of course, poor Vaemond, rip. Thought this actor did a fantastic job. Hope we get to see him in some other stuff. Basically committing suicide, right? Like he knew what was going to happen. And I saw some people complain, like, how dumb can he be? And it's like, well, he's kind of at the end of the line, right? This is it. If Corlys is indeed dying or dead, like he is it. It's kind of, I mean, now there are the younger folks, but he sees the writing on the wall. He wants to take control of the house. He's too strong-willed, and he acts brashly and pays for it. I don't see how he thought anything else was going to change. I think he maybe thought Rhaenys would side with the Greens, or the Greens would help him commit treason, essentially. But he got left out to dry. And not great for him. I would say it did not work out too well for him at all. Also, I thought that Emma Darcy's acting this episode, I already liked it. I loved it this episode. Adult Rhaenyra is full-fledged in your face here and is delivering for sure. Hello, Mama Nuts. Good to see you. Sally said, "Oh my God, this is exactly like Will Smith and Jada. He was fine until she looked at him." Yeah, they gave the the slap they put it over. Mrs. Duncan the Tall says, "I just love seeing baby Aegon and baby Viserys and Grandpa saying a name fit for a king, especially with Viserys' future as Hand and King." Yeah, and man, think about how much easier all this would have been if they hadn't named the kid Aegon just to spite Alicent. Because at the end of the episode, we all saw what happened, right? The twins are the only Kingsguard doing announcements. Yes. Comparing Viserys in the book being almost forgotten to the show is almost poetic. The real heroes are often forgotten by history. That is correct. Yes. Even the time given to Viserys' rule, it's all trumped by the dance, which in the histories will also be the case, future Game of Thrones timeline, right? Absolutely incredible scene in the throne room. Bob says, "I think they had Daemon in a bad image to his kids, perhaps due to how much people liked Daemon, as he was almost universally liked and almost seen as a good person." Well, I think they already had done all the editing for the show, so they had already decided to cut that. I doubt that they're on the cutting room floor each week. I think that they looked at the whole picture and said, we're giving Daemon too much. We need to dial it back a little bit, or it's going to be like we're forcing him down your throat. I think that's probably. So I think you're on the right track, Bob. Rhaenys had some meaty moments in this episode too. The stranger doesn't care if my eyes are opened or closed. One of the coldest things. And Rhaenys is so hard to calculate. Where she stands in all this, how she really feels. Obviously, her and Corlys did not leave on the best terms, and she's lost a lot. Like Rhaenys is so unjustly just shit on in this series. It drives me insane because she's so strong and such a good character. Vaemond wanted to go big or go tongueless. Well, he kept his tongue. Jamie says, "I was waiting for Daemon to say your grace after he put the crown on Viserys." Yeah, I could see how that would have been pretty cool. I think also like the silent of acknowledgement meant so much to Viserys. Yeah, Mendelin's correct. He said, "I like how they let the walk to the throne take the time it needed. They didn't rush it. Let it be uncomfortable." That's right. Let it be uncomfortable. and let it shine, because this is it. Like, this is the last moment for him. And you have to, they could have easily rushed this. And this is why I said I'm really happy with what I got out of this episode, that we're settled in now. Like, we're past the time jumps and everything. So it really does feel like this is the pace that we're going to be going on. I thought it was interesting seeing a lot of the casual viewers being like, good episode, a little slow. And I'm just thinking in my head, like, this is the best. This is peak Game of Thrones. This is peak A Song of Ice and Fire. This is what it's all about. Battle of the Bastards is cool, but give me this over that any day. Philip says Vaemond pulled up from half court. He thought it was drill time, and he got drilled. Also, Rhaenys clearly thinks Rhaenyra was killed. The heartbreak, we, the audience, can feel for that now. Brilliant. Yeah, she doesn't believe Rhaenyra at all, right? Yeah, supposedly the crown falling off of Viserys' head was an accident, and Matt Smith in that moment improved as Daemon and put the crown on his head. And like I said, if that's true, Hollywood tells a lot of tales. If it's true, bravo. I mean, you'll never capture that again. It would be a hard thing to capture. And it felt organic in the moment. Like, everything just felt like I was there and it was tangible. Too good. So if I had one issue with this episode, and I don't want to say it's an issue because it's just a decision that they've made and it's fine. But the only thing that I wonder about is how people would receive the fact that Viserys at the end, he's on Milk of the Poppy. He's going to the other world. Says that Aegon is the prince who was promised. And Alicent, of course, thinks that means that he's saying, you have to do this. You have to make sure it happens. And Alicent takes that as her Aegon, who assaulted he's a piece of garbage. We all know what he did, right? And Alicent even said, "You're no son of mine." So it's interesting that they're using the miscommunication trope. Obviously, the dangers of prophecy, clear. Also, the weight of someone's expectations on you with their last words. I've always thought that people that force something on someone who is about to remain living without them, like if I was on my deathbed and, I looked at you and I said, no matter what you want in life, for me, for my spirit, drive NASCAR, fast car. Like that's pretty like presumptuous of me, right? It's like, I'm dead. Why would I want to dictate? Because then you on the opposite side of the ventilator, over there, you're like, well, I guess I have to because I want to honor his spirit. I love Jimmy Nuts. I guess I'm riding fast car NASCAR. I gotta go and be a rival to Kyle Busch. My point is the fact that I've always thought it was weird whenever the dying person puts all that weight on the living person who already has to deal with grief and then feels like they're obligated to do something because it would dishonor them not to, right? And Viserys kind of does this to Alicent. So I think that that's a really interesting thing to examine. Obviously, the dangers of prophecy are all over this series. And Alicent is set up to believe this. And this is why I don't think it's a bad thing. I've seen some people talk about it. And whenever it happened, I was like, oh, okay. So that's how they're going to justify Alicent kind of backsliding a bit. They're going to have her go on this path, right? Thinking Aegon is the prince that was promised instead of the new Aegon, right? So the reason why it works for me, even though I was like, it's a decision. They could have just let people be terrible, but they give it this feeling of prophecy and miscommunication. The entire episode and really the season, but it's really heavy in this episode. There's a lot of religious subtlety when it comes to Alicent. She's been taking down Targaryen banners, putting up things for the 7. She's obviously wearing her 7-pointed star on her chest. And she's talking about the gods, makes everyone pray, where Daemon's laughing at the prayer. I thought that was pretty funny. But with that feeling of being religious and being righteous, which we all know Alicent is a bit self-righteous, with that comes this feeling whenever you feel like you are on the right path with whatever deity that you may serve, is that your actions can then feel divinely anointed. They can feel divinely justified. And I think a mixture of Alicent kind of leaning too far into the religion, into too far for righteousness, plus a prophecy on top and the grief that comes with losing Viserys, I think I think that was what they were building towards. And that's why I think that it makes sense. And some of you might say, well, that's ridiculous. But like, as someone who grew up in a very religious environment, this tracks for sure. And I won't go too much more down that rabbit hole, but I'm just saying, I think that there was a reason why all of the gods and the religion was playing a role. And now she has this prophecy that she's been given. I feel like it makes sense. So that's my take on it. I think they also could have just let people be terrible and have motivations. Maybe Otto is going to be more of a corrupter here. He's going to be for sure. But like, even in this episode, they could have done a little bit more with him kind of balancing off the fact that Alicent is kind of making amends with Rhaenyra in this episode. Yeah, so that's my take on the end of the episode. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Also, man, Rhaenyra and Alicent actually making peace at the dinner, and like the kids like having a couple moments of like happiness. I don't know, like I knew it wasn't going to last, but I felt like I was ecstatic. Like I actually felt a relief. I felt Viserys's relief. And when he took off his mask and said, "You will see me how I am," like we're talking all about this throne scene, which was amazing. How about his performance at the dinner and the lines that he delivered? All so real. All so very real. Kev said he'll drive NASCAR for me. Yeah, the NASCAR one was a little weird. Sometimes I go on tangents. I'm sorry. Marcus says, I'm not a fan of the prophecy itself every time it's mentioned. Well, they're going to tie it back to Game of Thrones. So I'm telling you now, the prophecy is going to matter even more down the road and how it's passed. And I also think that we'll probably see some weirdness with werewoods. They haven't been shooting all those scenes in front of that werewood for no reason. It's also a show only thing. Like the werewoods weren't in King's Landing at this time in the books. So this is all for a reason. And there is going to be ties back to Game of Thrones. If you're one of the people who don't want to remember that there was a show called Game of Thrones or a season 8, and you want these shows to be completely independent of one another, I'm sorry. There's absolutely no way that HBO is ever going to let you forget the fact that they had the most successful television show of all time. And I'm talking about numbers. I know season 8 sucked, but when you look at awards, when you look at money, and when you look at hours streamed, even since season 8 was on air, which is a whole nother thing I could talk about, it's the most successful show, right? So they're going to tie it back to that, and it just is what it is. So I'm like one of those people like, I don't care. Like I know season 8 wasn't good, and I thought season 7 was even worse actually. But it's one of those things where like there's still a ton of good there, and it's its own canon. So like, why wouldn't they connect it back? There's really no reason not to. And by the way, this is fantasy, so waiting on the last 2 episodes to judge it. Yeah. Did Nodgate show up on the aired episode? It doesn't show up in any clips other than the Twitter clip. Okay. Hayden, you may be correct. I saw people within the comments saying that that they weren't sure if it was cut or not. And to be fair, if I'm wrong and it's not in the episode, then we cannot use that as justification that they're kind of showing that Rhaenyra is not all good. Just kind of like Daemon hugging his kids got cut and then people saw it. Like that's not canon. It got cut. So it is what it is, right? Alicent's strengthening faith was talked about on Radio Westeros. They proposed her increased righteousness is born from the guilt of the deaths of the Strongs. Yeah, that's actually a really good point too, because she clearly was not comfortable with that. And I think also her making up with Rhaenyra, even though it hurts her to do so, and obviously like it could lead to bad things for her children, she probably sees this as some form of redemption for sure. Jason Luke are just a couple strong boys. I don't know. They get pushed around a lot, man. Hayden says, also Canadian Thanksgiving was the weekend episode 8 dropped. So watching the Greens and Blacks having a Thanksgiving dinner was perfect. Westeros is in Canada, confirmed. So if Aegon is the promised king, does that mean Jace has to die? I guess we'll have to find out. And if y'all know, don't say it in the chat, please. No spoilers. Oh my God, that image, dinner image was everything. I literally cried. It was so humbling to see your favorite books on screen as you picture them. Yeah, I always talk about how lucky I feel that we're getting this adapted. It's pretty dope. Dookie Shoe says Allison doesn't know anything about the prophecy, though. He didn't even finish saying the Song of Ice and Fire. No, he mentioned it to her in front of the fire at the boar hunt. He told her about the prophecy, I believe. Maybe not every detail, but he definitely mentioned it to her and the burden that he was carrying. Anyone notice that Aemon seemed genuinely into Allison's prayer during the feast for show? I'm guessing. Interesting. I didn't notice that. Those strong boys really need to learn how to take a compliment. I know people these days. My goodness. I really like Jace getting permission from Bela and then asking Helaena to dance when she naively tells everyone the state of her marriage to Aegon. Yeah. Jace just coming in, white knighting a little bit, you know. Astrid says, yeah, I cried so bad in the dinner scene. That moment with the sad music in the background of Viserys looking at everyone being nice to each other for like those 2 seconds. Yeah. I'm going to rewatch to see the nod. Yeah, we need to find out. Someone let me know. James says, I love how Helaena was happily and innocently clapping when Aemon did his toast. Yeah, Helaena is like the one true good soul in this show. There's more I want to say, but I can't because no spoilers past episode 8. Rhaenyra is the only living Targ who knows about the prophecy, though. Yes, the only living Targaryen, but Alicent also knows at this point because of him speaking to her about it at the boar feast. So it'll be interesting to see how that gets passed down, or maybe if it doesn't. Philip says the Blu-ray director's cut for this season seemed like they could have an extra season's worth of material at this rate. Yeah, we have Lena bonding with Vhagar was cut. Alicent and Viserys' wedding was also cut. Clearly, there's some stuff with Daemon that was also cut. And I bet you anything, there's more crab feeder. I don't even have a Blu-ray player in my house. My PS5's digital. Oh, I do have a PS4 somewhere. I'm going to have to get the Blu-rays for this. And I'm not a big deleted scenes person, just to be honest. Like, I like extended cuts of Lord of the Rings and such. But this is one I'm going to absolutely have to probably buy. Mrs. Duncan the Tall says, a debt was paid. Viserys lost an eye. Also notice that the side of Viserys' face decaying is this left side where all the greens are sitting. Yikes. Mrs. Duncan the Tall, I would say it sounds like you're on Team Rhaenyra here. It's a little biased, right? Dookie Shoe says, oh, I forgot about that scene at the fire, but then it kind of makes his death scene confusion with Alicent make no sense. How would it not make sense? So remember, he is completely hopped up on milk of the poppy. He's in his dying moments. He's thinking about this burden that he's had. Alicent is aware of the prophecy, and she is also aware of the fact that it is weighing heavily upon him, and then it has this big importance. And then he is saying at the end, he's talking more about the prophecy, and then he says it's Aegon. Like, you have to make sure that Aegon sits the throne. Like, it's you. You need to make sure he sits the throne. So, also, it's not clear, at least to me, if Viserys thought that Alicent was Rhaenyra. I don't know if he knew he was talking to Alicent at that moment, but I'm not totally sure. No. So you're saying as in she shouldn't be confused if she knew about it. The prophecy just states that a Targaryen would have to sit on the throne. The confusion comes from which Aegon. That's the confusion trope, not the prophecy itself. Hey, James, thank you for the 5-spot, man. Thanks for your content. I appreciate it very much. These aren't the most popular things on my channel, but this might be the most fun I have, to be honest. And it's also kind of opened up a whole new format for me, like to go live by myself, which if you're a fan of the channel, I'll be doing Chatting with Nuts this Friday by myself. We're gonna do the guest being the chat, and I'm just gonna take a whole lot of chat comments, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to go through. But James, thank you so much for the 5 spots. Very generous. Derry says the difference is so many between Aegon and Jace were shown super well. We were shown Jace having lessons with a maester in the aftermath of a sexual assault with Aegon. Yes. Ms. Duncan the Tall is biased and she knows it. That's funny. I'm certain too that dying Viserys thinks he's talking to Rhaenyra. Yeah, I think that's another thing that is a little bit ambiguous, at least for me, is that I don't know if he knew who he was talking to. Yeah. Viserys' last word made me think back at the fire. Yeah. But his whole arm is missing with Rhaenyra's side. That's really good. Tony says, so far, I think Aegon is my favorite character. I love dislikable characters, though, like Cersei. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Whenever I'm like crapping on Aegon the Second, which we got, Aegon the Elder, it's just the fact that he's hateable, but like he's doing a great job and it is a great character. And I enjoy a dastardly dog every now and then. Yeah, he thought it was Rhaenyra. So people seem to believe that. He thought he was also talking to Rhaenyra. James says, also, why is the prophecy such a secret? I imagine to stop pandemonium, also to stop the faith, because the faith do not mess around. One, they don't like prophecy, but two, they don't like anything that is supernatural, especially when it comes to anything pertaining to dragons and keeping that Targaryen bloodline pure and the extracurricular things going on beyond the wall. Anything supernatural, the faith does not seem to care for. The Maesters are very anti that, and they're very skeptical. And I think a lot of the skepticism that comes later, in our current timeline of A Song of Ice and Fire probably comes from the Maesters' point of view, and them being the ones that educate people and tell people what's true and what isn't. Lewin is a little bit of a mixed bag, right? Like Lewin seems like he at least will entertain to talk about it, but a lot of Maesters, I believe, kind of shrug it off, as if they're too good for it. So I think it's that. But also it is a story. So there has to be somewhat of suspension of belief here, at least in my opinion. Swagger Dagger, great name, says he thought he was continuing his conversation with Rhaenyra, or at least answering Rhaenyra's questions about Aegon's dream from the previous night. Yeah. Dookie Shoe says, Dookie Shoe is a great name too. Yeah, I thought he believed he was talking to Rhaenyra, finishing their previous conversation about the prophecy. Yeah, I think that makes sense. This confusion could be cleared up if that family would stop using names. I can't agree more. A CWN with the chat? Well, fine. Yes, I will be doing Chatting with Nuts this Friday by myself, and that might be the main format of Chatting with Nuts going forward. I am playing around with some ideas in my head. Also, and this doesn't really pertain to A Song of Ice and Fire, but there are so many conversation and discussion things now that I feel like adding to that volume and with the same people and all these things, I don't want to exhaust it. And yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that, but this isn't the place for it. Whitney says, I heard a theory that everyone being happy and laughing at the dinner scene was all in Viserys' imagination. It quick cuts to everyone laughing, then back to Vis, then shows Rhaenyra with a somber look. That's probably a fun one we could play around with, but I don't necessarily think it was just all a dream for Viserys, but I do like that. Viserys said something like, you asked if I believed in the prophecy, which to me indicated he definitely thought he was talking to Rhaenyra. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was having trouble kind of hearing him, and I didn't have my closed captioning on. So there's absolutely a chance that that would be a pretty clear indicator that it was Rhaenyra. That he thought it was Rhaenyra. Is a possibility. Yeah, it's one we could play with, right? Philip says they should do an Aegon multiverse movie where all 6 Aegons hang out and we see their misadventures. Actually, on Bend the Knee, we're going to be doing a Aegon tier list. Derry, I do love you. What are you talking about? Mrs. Duncan says, kudos to Paddy and the writers for making us care about Viserys so much. Can't wait for them to expand on other characters as well. Yeah. George said he wants this show to be 4 seasons, 10 episodes apiece. And I think if they're going to be adding in stuff like this now, and we're going to slow down a bit, that is the appropriate amount. And they could really mess with the timeline a little bit. Like, I think you can introduce some other of the houses that are going to be coming into play maybe sooner. And we're going to see a lot more of Westeros. So if you're someone who is saying, I really want to get out of Driftmark, King's Landing, the Steppe, all that stuff, and you're wanting to see some other place like the Riverlands, I don't think this is a spoiler to say, you're going to see other spots in Westeros. And I think that is also going to help with the pacing of the show, because we've seen a lot of major events in season 1 to get to this point where the setup was done, and a lot of death. And I think to pace that out is that you can kind of distract the viewer by going to new settings, new places, and new people. And also it gives stuff time to breathe, which is really nice. And also, who doesn't love it? A little bit of a change of scenery, right? Whitney says, do you think that by the time they got to the Mad King that the prophecy was still being passed down? Is there an indication that Bobby B knew? I would say no. And remember, this is a show only thing. So maybe the Mad King knew and it died with him, but I feel like it is lost. I assume it's going to be lost during the dance. That's my guess. And that's not spoilers because that's just my prediction. I think that in the show we will see the secret not be passed down. And then Rhaegar finds it later down the line. So yeah, Derry says, I think the prophecy gets lost and redreamed a couple times, but Bobby B has no way to know all the Targs who could tell him he killed. Yeah, and also on top of that, like, remember, the Targaryens are pretty terrible at, like, passing things down anyways. For instance, they are very, very bad at passing down how to bond with dragons. Like, all the way back from Valyria, they're guessing at things with the bonding at this point. Like, no one knows. They've lost a lot of that Valyrian heritage, and we're kind of seeing that with Daemon being kind of obsessed with it, as well as Viserys, but they're only obsessed with it because it's lost knowledge. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're going through scrolls, or going through books or whatever, looking for this information because they don't have it anymore. So they've done a pretty poor job thus far. So it's pretty believable that that they would lose the prophecy. The show has me curious what they could do with Aenys. Another scene as weak. Yeah, they could do a lot of stuff. Yes, James bringing up the next point I want to talk about. Helena's prophecy, beware the beast under the boards. Larys is skin changing into rats confirmed. This is what I wanted to bring up. And I don't subscribe to this theory, but I do think it's actually pretty funny, is that people are very convinced that, like, the rat imagery, and we see rats going in and out of the Red Keep constantly. People believe that Larys is a skin changer and that he is warging into the rats to see all the gossip and everything that's happening, which is crazy. And people believe that Helena's prophecy is actually hinting at this. I think it's hinting at something else, but I can't say it because it is a spoiler. I think that there are future events, and chat, please do not put any spoilers. I'm not even going to say what the name of this is because I don't want people to go Google. So I think it's hinting at a major event that we'll probably see in season 2, if I had to guess. Think we're getting Shipbreaker Bay in the season finale? Maybe, probably. I haven't really thought about it, honestly. I also need to reread this section of Fire and Blood because I forget a lot of the details. Like, I had forgot that Rhaenyra was the one that was supposed to kill Vaemond, not Daemon. Like, I couldn't remember what happened to him because there's a million names in that book. So I need to reread this section and see where I think the show is going to end. I thought Viserys was talking to Rhaenyra at the end, and at the end with Emma, at no point with Alicent. There you go. Yeah, I think that is the general consensus. But I was still trying to explain how, even if he did know it was Alicent, like, it still makes sense. Am I right in thinking there were no rats in episode 8? Yeah, I didn't see any. Patty says, why crazy? We've seen people warg in Game of Thrones. Yes, people who have ties to the old blood and of the first men seem like they possibly have this ability. Obviously, the Starks have this ability. Green Seers. I have no evidence that Larys has this ability. Like, none of his brothers seem to have it. They don't mention it. So it feels like it would be a little out of left field. And also, like, the beast under the boards makes a lot of sense for another event that's going to happen. Like, it's almost on the nose if you know it. So I think I always go with the thing that makes the most sense or is the most possible or likely. And I feel like that's more likely. But hey, if they turn Larys into a war guy and rats, I'm down. Whatever. Let's get weird. I am rereading Fire and Blood right now, and the show is helping keep my timeline straight for once. Yeah, and they've slid things around in the timeline too. The Strongs are first men, though. Yes, they are. That is correct. I'm saying, but correlation is not causation, right? So, like, not every Strong has it. So maybe even if his brothers don't have it, then Larys could have it. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's not likely. A little late now to introduce wargame. Well, yes and no, right? Do I think it would be kind of abrupt and wild? Yeah. But I've only seen Larys on screen a couple times. You know, like, he is a mysterious character. And there's also the thing that I cannot figure out for the life of me. And it's whenever Helaena and I want to say this before I say this, because if it's hinting at a future event that hasn't happened in the show yet and it's in Fire and Blood, please do not say it in chat. Just let me be confused. But I was going over with Sir Matt on the Bend the Knee episode that we recorded last night, and we were talking about Helena's prophecies. Some of them have come true. Some of them are actually foreshadowing the end of the show, which is wild. But she has the spider, and she does the whole greens and blacks, dragon of thread, dragon of flesh, or whatever. But she has the spider in her hand and a seashell, and she clamps the spider down. And that has nothing to do with what she's actually talking about. Like, she has a voiced prophecy in that moment. But the act of them zooming in, like, so you can see the spider, and she caps it with the seashell, and then the camera cuts to Larys, which Larys, I believe, is the spider-like character in the show. But I can't figure out what in the world the seashell means. I thought Valerians, I was thinking Corlys or something, but there's no real correlation between Larys and the Valerians, even in the future of what's going to happen. So I have to think more about that. Can't wait to see what the prophecy actually means. Got me curious now. Yeah. George says maybe Larys is a Greenseer. Yeah, he could be. For sure. I haven't seen evidence of it yet, but it could. The settings more than the actors. CC Redstone, Dragon Keep. Yeah. I'm so scared to watch episode 9. I feel like someone's going to die based on Game of Thrones history. Yeah, I mean, for those who, either didn't watch the show or didn't pay attention to episode numbers, all of the big stuff happens in episode 9. The penultimate episode is actually usually the climax of a season in Westeros TV. But is House of the Dragon going to follow that same formula? I think so. I think 9 is going to have some craziness. I did not watch episode 9 preview. I don't really watch the previews. Matt usually tells me about them, but I don't watch them because I like experiencing it for the first time. Like, you only get to do that once. And I like just going in it blind. Yeah, the visual of the trap spider's clever. Larys trapped by the greens, maybe. Yeah, it's hard to say. And the fact that it's a seashell, I don't know. Something weird about it. They're setting up scenes in the werewood specifically. There has to be some sort of payoff. Yeah, Patty, I do agree with that. And I said that earlier. Be prepared in this show for some weirwood weirdness. And it's going to be show only canon, and it's going to be a show only thing. But I absolutely believe that there's going to be some weird stuff going on. I've even kind of thought about the fact that they could play around with who is the three-eyed raven or the three-eyed crow, excuse me. Yeah, but that's a discussion for another time for sure. Darius says, I think the 9th episode climax to have the so falling action works super well. Yeah, I agree. And also you can do a little bit, like, people don't get as offended by like a linking action or a cliffhanger in episode 10 if you gave them the house, right? If you gave them the farm in episode 9. I'm pretty sure these last episodes are going to be a sort of explosive 2-part season finale. And that's the other thing they could do. They could start the climax in 9 and then do the cliffhanger and then really bring it home in 10. Like, the first half of 10 is just boom, 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 which would still kind of be in the same vein as the original show, but different. So Philip says, I think the end of the season will be like Game of Thrones 6, where people debate if episode 9 or 10 is better. Yeah. And honestly, they got a lot to do to make it better than 8 for me. So the last episode will be King Bran, the Broken, turning off his werewood. Honestly, I'd be fine with that. Pedro, weird stuff. Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah. So one interesting thing that I'll leave you with is the fact that the person who did episode 4, which I thought was excellent, which also had a lot of subtlety in it, is the same person that is doing episode 9. So that is really encouraging for me because that episode 4 was the penultimate for 5 in the first half of the season, right? So now they're also doing 9. And the dialogue and everything in that episode was fantastic. And a lot of foreshadowing for the end of the series was also in episode 4. So I'm very excited to see what they're going to be doing here. And guys, we only have 2 episodes left. What are we going to do for a year and a half waiting for the next season? What am I going to do? The answer is going to be doing Bend the Knee podcast. And we're going to be reading through Storm of Swords and going through all kinds of stuff, but we will be continuing the weekly reread, chapter at a time every week. So even if you're not going to read along with us, it's a great thing to like kind of just keep yourself immersed in the universe. If you just want to put it on and hear someone discuss a chapter in Game of Thrones book, it's always good. So Tony says, did you see Dance with Dragons Folio Society edition got revealed? I'm so excited. It's my favorite book. Mine already shipped. I ordered it so fast, and I got the shipping notification today, which I thought was on pre-order still. But yeah, I have all of the folios back here. That'll be the fifth and final one for now. They are on the hook. They said if George ever finishes the books, that they will make them. So here's the hoping. Also, November 2024. That's when Wins is going to come out for sure. I know for sure. Well, everyone, thank you so much for being here. I love covering this episode. I thought episode 8 was absolutely the strongest episode of the season. I hope it was yours. And we'll be back next week to do episode 9, the penultimate episode. We might be in for a doozy of a time with that one. I will be live Friday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time for Chatting with Nuts. And the guest is you, chat. So you can come be interactive with me. And I might even throw up a couple polls or two just to kind of get everyone's ideas about some topics I want to ask questions about. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate this. I'm going to miss this when this is gone after the show is over. But we will be back, obviously next year with, maybe even a year and a half from now with those live reactions. But I will be on Bend the Knee, constantly talking about House of the Dragon updates and book updates and everything else. So until I see you next time, be good, be safe. Drop a like on this video and help me out. Remember to always keep turning the page.